The phone buzzed against the nightstand at 6:47 in the morning, and I let it ring itself into silence before I even opened my eyes. 3 missed calls. All from Emily. I stared at the ceiling fan turning in slow, tired circles and felt something in my stomach that I couldn't name yet. Not worry, not yet. Something closer to a held breath. I hadn't called her back the night before. I'd seen her texts around 10, "The party's running late, don't wait up," and I'd set the phone face down on the counter and gone to bed. It wasn't the first night I'd done that. It wouldn't be memorable, I told myself, rolling over, except that when I finally sat up and looked at the window, there was a shape standing on my porch through the frosted glass of the front door. Still. Waiting. She hadn't knocked. My name is James. I'm 34, a structural engineer at a firm in Asheville, North Carolina, married 7 years to my wife Emily, with a 5-year-old son named Noah who was, thankfully, still asleep down the hall. I want to say I was a good husband. I paid the bills on time, I never raised my voice, I coached Noah's t-ball team on Saturdays when I could get away from the office. What I didn't do, what I'm only now able to say out loud, was look at my wife long enough to notice she'd stopped looking back. That morning, when I opened the door, Emily was standing there in last night's dress with her heels in one hand and mascara ghosted under her eyes, and she said 4 words that I would replay for months afterward. I need to talk. I want to be clear about something before I go further. Nothing about that morning felt like the beginning of a story to me. It felt like an inconvenience. I remember thinking, with an irritation I'm not proud of, that I had a 9 a.m. call with a client about a retaining wall in Biltmore Park, and that whatever Emily needed to talk about would have to wait until I'd had coffee. That's the kind of husband I was. The kind who scheduled his wife's emergencies around his Outlook calendar. She came inside. She didn't sit down. She stood by the kitchen island with her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, even though the house was warm, even though it was late June and the AC hadn't even kicked on yet. I poured coffee into 2 mugs out of habit before I remembered she probably didn't want any. "You didn't answer," she said. "I was asleep. I called 3 times. I saw." I set the mug down harder than I meant to. "You said you'd be late. I figured you were fine." She looked at me then in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Not angry, not sad exactly, just tired, the way you look at someone when you've been carrying something heavy and your arms are finally giving out. "James," she said, "I don't think I'm fine." I didn't ask her what she meant. Looking back, that's the first thing I'd change if I could go back and stand in that kitchen again. I didn't ask. I let the silence sit there instead, because some part of me, some old animal part, already knew that whatever came next was going to cost me something, and I wasn't ready to pay it. So I did what I always did. I changed the subject to something manageable. "Is this about the party?" She almost laughed, a short, broken sound, not really a laugh at all. "It's about a lot of things." Noah's door creaked open down the hall, and we both went quiet the way parents do, mid-argument, mid-crisis, snapping back into the performance of normalcy before a 5-year-old wanders in asking for cereal. Emily wiped under her eyes fast, a practice motion, like she'd done it in a car mirror more than once recently. I noticed that. I noticed it and let it go, the way I'd let go of 100 small things over the past few months. A phone turned face down on the table, a laugh that came a half-second too late when I said something in front of Marcus at his last barbecue, the new perfume I didn't recognize on the collar of her jacket that I told myself was probably something from Sephora, a gift, nothing. There's a specific kind of quiet that comes right before you understand something you don't want to understand yet. Maybe you know it. It's not dread exactly. It's more like standing at the top of a staircase in the dark, 1 foot already lifted, already knowing there are more steps than you can see. Noah padded into the kitchen in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing his eyes, and Emily crouched down instantly, scooping him into a hug that lasted a beat too long, her face pressed into his hair like she was hiding in it. I watched her hold our son like something she was afraid of losing, and some small, useless part of my brain filed that away as sweet instead of what it actually was, which was guilt. "Mommy, you smell like outside," Noah said, and Emily laughed, a real one this time, wet and sudden, and said she'd take a shower before breakfast. She didn't go upstairs right away. She stood in the kitchen a moment longer, watching me pour cereal into Noah's blue bowl like nothing had happened, like she hadn't shown up on our porch at 7 in the morning with her shoes in her hand and a sentence she never finished. Just before she turned to go, she said one more thing, quiet enough that I almost missed it over the sound of milk hitting cereal. "We need to talk tonight." "Really talk?" I told her fine. I told her I had a busy day. I did not know, as I said it, that by the time that night came, I would already have found the first thing that made all of this make a terrible kind of sense. A message on a phone I wasn't supposed to see, left open on the counter by mistake, that would turn an ordinary Tuesday into the day I stopped being the man who didn't ask questions. The message on Emily's phone appeared at 6:52 that evening, while she was upstairs giving Noah his bath and I was standing in the kitchen scraping plates into the sink. Her phone was face up on the counter, charging, screen lit from a text that came in fast and disappeared just as fast into the lock screen. I caught 4 words before it faded, "Can't stop thinking about," and a name I knew better than my own reflection, Marcus. I stood there with a plate in my hand, water running, and told myself it meant nothing. Marcus had been my best friend since sophomore year at App State. He'd been in our wedding. He'd held Noah in the hospital before half my own family got there. Of course he texted her. He texted both of us all the time, about football, about the deck he was building for us for free on weekends, about nothing. Can't stop thinking about what, though? I didn't pick up the phone. I want to be honest about that, because it would have been so easy, 3 seconds, 1 thumb, and I didn't do it. I told myself I trusted her. Really, if I'm being fair to myself now, I think I was afraid of what trusting her would cost me if I turned out to be wrong. I need to back up a little, because none of this happened out of nowhere. Life before that morning on the porch had gone quiet in a way I hadn't clocked as a warning. Emily used to talk through her whole day at dinner, this endless, funny stream of details about her coworkers, about a client's dog that kept eating the office plants, about a stupid meme Marcus had sent in the group chat. Sometime in the last year, that had thinned out into single sentences. Fine. Busy. Same as always. I noticed the quiet. I just decided it was easier not to poke at it, the way you don't poke at a bruise you're hoping will heal on its own. She'd started painting again, too, actual canvases, something she hadn't touched since before Noah was born, when she gave up freelance graphic design for a steadier marketing job with health insurance. I'd found her out in the garage one night at 11, a lamp clipped to a shelf, brush in hand, an expression on her face I hadn't seen in years. I remember standing in the doorway a second too long before she noticed me, and something about the way she startled, hand jerking, brush clattering against the easel tray, told me I'd walked in on something she hadn't wanted witnessed. "Didn't hear you," she'd said, laughing it off, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You scared me. Since when do you paint at 11 at night?" "Since I remembered I like it." A little edge in her voice. I let it drop. I want to stop here for a second, because I think this is the part people skip past when they tell stories like this. The part where nothing dramatic is happening yet, where you're just living your life, mowing the lawn, packing lunches, and somewhere underneath all of it, something has already started to come loose. If you've ever looked back at an ordinary Tuesday and realized, only in hindsight, that it was the day everything started tilting, you already know what I mean. At the time it's just a Tuesday. It's just your wife painting in the garage. It's just a text you didn't open. Marcus came by that Saturday to finish staining the deck, and I remember it as one of the good days, the 3 of us, plus Noah running around with a stick pretending it was a lightsaber, Marcus cracking beers and telling the story about the time we got lost hiking Mount Mitchell in college, a story I'd heard 50 times and still laughed at. Emily laughed too, but I noticed, and again filed away, again let go, that her laugh came a half beat behind his joke, like she was reacting to something else entirely, something underneath the words. At one point Marcus said something about a woman he'd been seeing, some brief fling that had already fizzled, and Emily got up abruptly to check on Noah, who was fine, who didn't need checking on. Marcus watched her go with an expression I couldn't read and didn't try very hard to. I handed him another beer. We talked about the Panthers' draft picks. The sun went down orange behind the ridge line, and it was, on the surface, a perfect Saturday. It was around then, I didn't know it yet, but it mattered more than I understood, that Emily started taking her phone into the bathroom when she showered. A small thing. The kind of thing you'd never mention out loud to anyone, because said aloud it sounds paranoid, sounds like nothing. My wife brings her phone into the bathroom. But I noticed it, the way you notice a change in the pitch of a familiar sound, and some low animal part of my brain filed it under a category I hadn't given a name to yet. 2 weeks before the party, she started going to what she called girls' night, with a coworker named Rachel, drinks downtown, sometimes a late dinner. I never met Rachel. I never asked to. I told myself that was a sign of a healthy marriage, two people who didn't need to monitor each other's social lives, and maybe in a different marriage, with a different set of missing pieces underneath it, that would have been true. The night before the party, the one that ended with her on my porch at dawn, she asked me if I wanted to come. "It's just a work thing," she said, standing in the closet doorway, holding up 2 dresses like the question was really about which one, not about whether I'd be there at all. "You'd be bored. It's mostly people from the Charlotte office. I've got the Biltmore Park project," I said. "Deadline Monday." "Right." She said it fast, almost relieved, and hung the blue dress back up, keeping the black one. I figured. I didn't ask why she seemed relieved. I didn't ask who else from the Charlotte office would be there, or whether Marcus, who did occasional consulting work for her firm's client events, who I knew for a fact had mentioned something about a summer mixer downtown, might be one of them. I kissed her on the cheek and went back to my laptop, and somewhere behind me she stood in the closet a moment longer than she needed to, phone already in her hand, already typing something I would never see. It would be 2 more days before I found the first piece of evidence that would not let me look away again, a single receipt, crumpled at the bottom of her gym bag, from a hotel bar 11 miles from where she said she'd been. The receipt was for 2 drinks, an old-fashioned and something called a smoke and mirrors, whatever that was, charged to a card at 9:14 p.m. on a Tuesday. She told me she was working late. I found it 2 days after the deck-staining Saturday, digging through her gym bag for a missing charger cable, and for a long moment I just stood there in the laundry room holding a crumpled piece of paper like it might explain itself if I looked at it long enough. The bar was called The Foundry. I didn't recognize the name. I typed it into my phone standing right there among the dirty towels, and the first thing that came up was a rooftop lounge attached to a boutique hotel downtown, the kind of place with a $20 cocktail menu and string lights, the kind of place you go to be seen, not the kind of place you duck into after a long day of client meetings in Charlotte, which is where she told me she was. I didn't confront her. I want to be honest about why, because it wasn't restraint, and it wasn't trust, it was fear, plain and simple, dressed up as patience. If I said nothing, the marriage stayed intact for 1 more day. If I asked the question, I might not be able to unask it. So I put the receipt in my wallet, behind my license, where I told myself I'd deal with it later, and I went back to being a man who didn't ask questions. That week I started noticing things I'd trained myself not to notice. The way she angled her phone screen away from me at the kitchen table, not dramatically, just a small practice rotation, like she'd done it so many times it had become instinct rather than concealment. The way she volunteered information before I asked for it. "I'm gonna grab dinner with Rachel Thursday, that okay?" A kind of preemptive honesty that, looking back, felt less like openness and more like laying groundwork. I remember one night in particular. We were doing dishes, Noah already down, and I asked, casually, whether Marcus had said anything to her about the fishing trip he and I were supposed to take in August. It was an ordinary question. I watched her hand still on the plate she was rinsing, just for a second, just long enough that if I hadn't already been looking for something, I would never have seen it. "He mentioned it," she said. "Said work's been busy." "Busy how?" "He's a contractor in the summer, that's his whole season." "I don't know, James, I'm not his secretary." A little too sharp. She set the plate down harder than it needed to be set down, and the sound of it in the quiet kitchen felt like a door closing somewhere I couldn't see. I want to stop the story here for a second, because there's a specific kind of loneliness that comes from living inside a marriage where you've started keeping score of small inconsistencies nobody else would notice. If you've ever laid in bed next to someone and run the same 3 sentences through your head on a loop, trying to find the version of them that makes sense, you already know the particular exhaustion I mean. Around this time, my mother called. She'd run into Emily's coworker Rachel at the farmer's market, and mentioned, in the offhand way mothers mention things that end up mattering enormously, that Rachel had asked how our anniversary trip planning was going. I didn't know what she meant. We hadn't planned an anniversary trip. When I brought it up to Emily that night, she laughed it off almost too quickly. Rachel gets things mixed up, she probably meant someone else's anniversary. And changed the subject to Noah's upcoming kindergarten orientation. I let it go. Another small inconsistency filed away in a drawer that was getting harder to close. I didn't know it then. This is what she was living through, on her end, during a lot of these weeks that I'm describing from the outside. I told myself it was the last time. Every time. That's the part nobody understands unless they've done it themselves. You don't plan to keep going, you just keep finding reasons the last time doesn't count yet. I'd sit in my car in the parking garage after seeing him, engine off, hands on the wheel, telling myself this was it, this was where I stopped, and then my phone would light up with his name and something in my chest would go warm and stupid and I'd answer anyway. I wasn't looking for this. I want that understood, even if it doesn't excuse anything. I had a husband who loved me in his own careful, distracted way, and a son who needed me, and somewhere underneath all of that I had become a person I didn't recognize in the mirror, someone who checked her phone in the bathroom with the door locked, someone who'd started to feel more like herself in a text thread than in her own kitchen. That's what she told me, much later. I knew none of it yet. The following Sunday, we had brunch with Marcus and his on and off girlfriend at the time, Danielle, at a place downtown near the river. It should have been unremarkable. Instead, I watched Emily and Marcus fall into an easy, private rhythm of jokes I wasn't part of, references to something that had apparently happened at a client event I hadn't heard about, a shorthand between them that felt less like old friendship and more like a language they'd built recently, just the two of them. Danielle noticed it too. I saw her notice it, a flicker of something crossing her face when Marcus reached over to steal a fry off Emily's plate without asking, the kind of easy intimacy that used to be reserved, in my mind, for people who'd known each other 20 years, not the casual overlap of a husband's college roommate and his wife. Afterward, in the car, I asked Emily if something had happened between her and Marcus at that client event. I don't know what made me ask it directly like that. Maybe the fry, maybe the receipt still folded behind my license, maybe just the accumulated weight of 2 months of small, dismissible things. She looked out the window for a second too long before answering. What kind of question is that? A normal one. Nothing happened, James. He's your best friend. God. She said it with an exasperation that, at the time, I read as insulted innocence. It would take me weeks to understand it as something closer to panic, badly disguised as annoyance, the fastest exit available from a question she wasn't ready to answer. I didn't push it further that night. I told myself I'd overreacted, that a fry and an inside joke didn't make a case for anything, that I was letting one crumpled receipt turn me into someone suspicious of his own wife. But that night, lying next to her in the dark, I made a decision I hadn't made before. The next time something felt wrong, I wasn't going to file it away. I was going to look. And 2 weeks later, when Emily left her laptop open on the kitchen counter while she ran out to grab Noah from a playdate, I would find the first thing I couldn't explain away, no matter how badly I wanted to. The laptop was open to her email, and I told myself I was just closing it, that I wasn't going to look, right up until the moment my hand was already on the trackpad instead of the lid. There wasn't anything damning in the inbox itself, just work threads, a receipt confirmation from a boutique she liked, a calendar invite for something called Design Sync off-site. That made my stomach tighten for reasons I couldn't articulate yet. What caught me was a second tab, still open in the browser behind the email. A private photo-sharing app one didn't recognize, one I later learned was popular for exactly the reason I was about to discover. Messages that disappeared, photos that expired, a digital conversation built specifically not to leave a trail. I had maybe 90 seconds before Emily got back with Noah. I used 40 of them staring at the screen, trying to decide whether opening it made me a man protecting his family, or a man about to destroy one. I opened it anyway. There wasn't much visible. Most of the thread had already expired, the way the app was designed to. But there was one message still sitting unopened at the top, a small red notification dot beside a name I already knew too well. Marcus. I didn't click it. I heard the garage door groaning open, and I closed the laptop so fast I nearly knocked over her coffee mug, and by the time Emily walked in with Noah on her hip, chattering about a shark he'd built out of Legos at his friend's house, I was standing at the sink with my back to her, hands shaking under the running water. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to her in the dark, running through everything I hadn't let myself add up before: the receipt from the foundry, the fry at brunch, the phone angled away, the private app with his name sitting there like a hand reaching out of the dark. Somewhere around 2 in the morning I got up, went down to my truck, and sat in the driver's seat in the driveway with my laptop, doing the thing I'd never imagined myself doing. I searched her name and his together. Nothing came up except old photos from our wedding, Marcus in a groomsman's tux with his arm around her shoulder, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. The next real break came almost by accident, the way these things so often do. Noah's kindergarten orientation subplot, which had been sitting quietly in the background of the last few weeks, Emily fussing over school supply lists, arguing gently with me about which elementary they'd zoned us into, collided with everything else on a Thursday afternoon when I left work early to pick him up because Emily had texted that she was stuck in a meeting. I arrived at the school to find that no such pickup had been scheduled through Emily. The front office had her down as the one collecting him, and when I called her to ask what was going on, she didn't pick up. Not once, not twice, 4 times, straight to voicemail, at 3:40 on a Thursday afternoon when she should have been at her desk 20 minutes away. She called back 40 minutes later, breathless, apologizing, saying her phone had died and she'd been in the copier room, of all places, when she realized. It was a small, forgettable excuse if you weren't already looking for cracks. I was already looking for cracks. That weekend, Marcus texted the group chain about the fishing trip, a real, ordinary logistics text about which weekend worked, and something in me, some cold and careful part one didn't know I had, decided to test something. I told him, alone, in a separate message, that I might not be able to make it after all, work was slammed. He wrote back immediately, "No worries, man, we'll figure it out." Nothing strange there. But 20 minutes later, Emily mentioned, unprompted, over dinner, that Marcus had told her the fishing trip might get pushed back, information I hadn't shared with her, that I'd only told Marcus, alone, in a private text an hour earlier. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth and felt something in my chest go very quiet and very still. It wasn't proof. A husband and wife's best friend talk sometimes. That's not a crime. But it meant they were talking about things I hadn't told her, which meant he was talking to her about things that were, in some sense, still mine to decide. It was a small thread, thin as a hair, but I pulled it anyway. I started checking things I never used to check, not obsessively, not yet, but with a new and unfamiliar attentiveness. Our shared calendar. The car's mileage against her stated schedule. I told myself this was reasonable, that any husband who'd found a receipt and a hidden app and an unexplained 40-minute gap on a Thursday afternoon would do the same. I also knew, somewhere underneath the reasoning, that I had crossed some line between a man trying to understand his marriage and a man building a case. The foundry receipt sat behind my license for 11 days before I did anything with it. On the 12th day, I drove there on my lunch break, sat at the same rooftop bar, and asked the bartender, a kid who couldn't have been older than 25, wiping down glasses with the particular boredom of someone who's seen every kind of desperate customer, if he remembered a woman matching Emily's description on a Tuesday a few weeks back. He didn't, not specifically, Dozens of women fit that description on any given Tuesday, but he did mention, unprompted, that the rooftop got a lot of regular business types from a marketing firm 2 blocks over, and that one guy, tall, dark hair, always paid cash, came in often enough that the staff knew his order without asking. An old-fashioned. I didn't need him to say the name. I already had it. I drove home that day and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside, running one thought over and over. I still didn't have proof, not the kind that would hold up if I said it out loud, not the kind Emily couldn't explain away with the same tired, plausible half-truths she'd been handing me for weeks. What I had was a shape. An outline of something I could feel but not yet see whole. That night, Emily asked if I wanted to go with her and Marcus and Danielle to a 4th of July barbecue the following weekend, and I said yes before I'd even decided to, some instinct telling me that if I wanted to see the whole shape of what was happening, I needed to be in the room when it happened, not investigating from the outside anymore. I didn't know it yet, but that barbecue, full of people, full of noise, full of the appearance of normal life, was where the last piece would fall into place, not because I found it, but because I wasn't even the one looking when it did. The barbecue was at Marcus's place, string lights over the patio, a cooler full of beers sweating in the July heat, Noah running through a sprinkler in the yard with 2 other kids from the neighborhood. I stood by the grill with a beer I wasn't really drinking, watching Emily and Marcus the way you watch a magic trick you already suspect is rigged, waiting to catch the hand moving when you're not supposed to be looking. I never got the chance to catch it myself. Danielle did it for me. It happened fast, the way these things always seem to in hindsight, even though I'd later learn it had been building in her for weeks. A wrong text from Marcus's phone, sent to her instead of Emily, that she hadn't mentioned to anyone, waiting, watching, deciding what to do with it. She was refilling her wine at the drink table when Marcus leaned past her to grab a beer and his phone lit up in his back pocket, a notification banner flashing across the screen just long enough for her to read it. I saw her face change before I understood why. I saw her set the wine bottle down very carefully, the way you set something down when you're trying not to throw it. Marcus! Her voice cut through the yard, flat and hard, and every conversation around the patio stopped at once. Who's Em? The silence that followed had a texture to it. I felt it in my teeth. What are you talking about? Marcus said, too fast, reaching for his phone. Don't. Danielle held it out of reach, already scrolling, her hand shaking. Can't stop thinking about last night. Who sends that to their best friend's wife, Marcus? I don't remember crossing the yard. I remember being suddenly close enough to see Emily's face go white, to see her set her own drink down on the porch rail with a hand that wasn't steady. And I remember my own voice coming out of me low and strange, not the voice I usually had. Say that again. Danielle turned the phone toward me, and there it was, his words, timestamped 2 nights before, the same night Emily had told me she was at Rachel's. I read it twice. I felt something break loose in my chest that I'd been holding shut for weeks without admitting it, and my voice went first, cracking on the very first sentence and never fully coming back. 2 nights ago. I looked at Emily. You were at Rachel's. James. Say it back to me. Say where you were. She didn't answer. Her mouth opened and nothing came out, and I felt the ground under everything I'd built for 7 years just quietly give way, all at once, no warning left to give. I wasn't shouting. I couldn't have shouted if I'd tried. My throat had closed around something too big to push words through. I felt tears come and didn't try to stop them, didn't care who saw, and underneath the wreck of it there was something else starting to burn, low and steady, something I didn't have words for yet. Everyone needs to leave, Marcus said weakly, to no one, to everyone. No. I heard my own voice finally come back, rougher than before. No, nobody's leaving. Emily. Now. Tell me. She started crying before she started talking, which somehow made it worse, like she'd rehearsed the tears longer than the confession. It's not, James, it's not what you... She stopped herself, because we both already knew it was exactly what it looked like, and lying about it in front of 6 people including Danielle, whose hand was still shaking around Marcus's phone, wasn't going to hold. How long? I wasn't asking anymore. Please, not here. How long, Emily? She looked at Marcus once, a look I understood later as her silently asking permission to say the truth out loud, though I didn't understand it in the moment. And then she looked back at me, and something in her seemed to finally stop fighting. 4 months, she said. The number landed like a physical blow. 4 months. Noah's birthday party. Our anniversary dinner. 100 ordinary nights I'd been sitting across from her at our own table while she carried this. I sat down on the porch step because my legs didn't feel entirely mine anymore, and Emily crouched near me, not touching me, just close, and the rest came out of her in one long unbroken rush, like something finally let off a leash. It started at the client mixer in March, she said, her voice unsteady but not stopping. The one you couldn't come to because Noah had that ear infection. I was standing there completely alone, and Marcus showed up because he was doing the deck estimate for that other project downtown, and he saw me. Actually saw me, James, the way nobody had in I don't know how long. I'd stopped being anything but Noah's mom and the wife to almost everyone, including myself, and he asked what I'd been painting lately, and I almost cried right there because you hadn't asked me that in a year. That first night nothing happened, I swear, we just talked for 2 hours, and I told myself that was fine, that was allowed. Then he texted the next day, and I told myself answering was fine too. Every single time I told myself this was the last time, this one text, this one drink, and I never meant to let it become anything, but I kept choosing it anyway, over and over, because for an hour I got to feel like a person instead of just a role I was playing in somebody else's life. I was so afraid of you finding out that I stopped being able to look at Noah's drawings on the fridge without feeling sick. I'd stand in the shower some nights and I don't even know. I knew I should stop. I told myself I would stop after the barbecue. I told myself that this morning. I didn't say anything for a long moment. Danielle had already turned and walked off the patio, phone still clutched in her fist, Marcus calling weakly after her into the dark of the yard, getting no answer. Somewhere behind me I could hear Noah laughing in the sprinkler, oblivious, and the sound of it cut through me sharper than anything Emily had just said. Get away from me, I told her, standing, my voice finally steady again, cold in a way that scared me a little. Get Noah's stuff. We're leaving. I didn't know it yet, but the drive home that night, in total silence, would be easier than the conversation still waiting for us on the other side of it. The house was quiet when we got home, Noah asleep in the back seat before we even hit the highway, and I carried him up to bed still in his damp swim trunks while Emily stood in the doorway of his room, not entering, like she already understood she didn't have the right to that space yet. I didn't sleep in our bed that night. I took the couch, and somewhere around 2 a.m. I heard her come down the stairs and sit on the bottom step, not saying anything, just being there, the way you sit outside a door you're not allowed to open. I'm not doing this tonight, I said, staring at the ceiling. I know. A pause. I just didn't want you to be alone in it. I'm not the one who wasn't alone, Emily. She didn't answer that. I heard her go back upstairs a few minutes later, and I lay there in the dark of my own living room, in my own house, feeling like a stranger in it. We talked 3 days later, really talked, the way she'd asked to that first morning on the porch, except now there was nothing left to protect either of us from the truth of it. I asked her the thing I hadn't been able to ask at the barbecue, in front of everyone. Did you love him? She was quiet a long time. I don't know if it was ever about him, she finally said. I think I loved how he made me feel. I don't think those are the same thing, and I didn't understand the difference until it was already too late to matter. That's not an answer. No, she admitted. It's the honest one, though. I filed for divorce 11 days later. Emily didn't fight it, not the divorce itself, not the custody arrangement we worked out with a mediator instead of a courtroom, 50-50 with Noah's school schedule as the anchor. Because whatever else had broken between us, either of us wanted our son to inherit the wreckage. She moved into a one-bedroom apartment across town by the end of August. I kept the house. Marcus, for his part, disappeared from both our lives almost entirely. No dramatic falling out, no confrontation I got to have with him directly, just silence where a decade of friendship used to be. I heard through mutual acquaintances, months later, that Danielle had left him within the week, and that the fishing buddies who'd known us both quietly stopped inviting him to things. He sent one text in September, "I'm sorry, man, I never meant for it to go that far," and I didn't answer it. Some doors don't need slamming. You just don't walk back through them. Emily called in October, asked if we could talk again, said there were things she still hadn't said. I let her come by on a Sunday afternoon, while Noah was at his t-ball game with my mother. She sat at the same kitchen island where she'd stood dripping in last night's dress 5 months earlier, and this time she told me the rest of it, the parts she hadn't been able to get out in front of Danielle and Marcus and a yard full of stunned neighbors. How she tried to end it twice before, how she told herself each time was the last, how the fear of losing everything had somehow never been louder than the fear of disappearing entirely inside a life that no longer had room for who she used to be. "I'm not asking you to take me back," she said when she'd finished. "I know that door's closed. I just needed you to actually hear it, not just the version I gave you standing in Marcus's backyard. It doesn't change anything," I said, and I meant it, but I also meant something gentler underneath it. "I hope you figure out who you are, Emily. I really do. Just not with me trying to fix it for you anymore." She nodded, and there were tears, but quiet ones, the kind that come with acceptance instead of desperation. She left before Noah got home. I stood at the sink afterward, washing 2 coffee mugs I hadn't needed to make, and something in my chest that had been clenched since that morning on the porch finally, quietly, let go. I started sleeping through the night again sometime that winter. I hadn't noticed how long it had been since I had. By spring, Noah had a system down between 2 houses, a backpack he packed himself with a kind of 5-year-old pride that broke my heart a little every Sunday night. Emily and I could sit across from each other at his birthday party without the air going tight. I'd become, without exactly setting out to, a better listener, to Noah, to the few friends I had left, to myself, on the long drives home from job sites where I used to just turn the radio up instead of sitting with anything uncomfortable. I recognized myself again, somewhere along the way, and it wasn't the man who used to let a phone ring itself into silence. That's my story. A crumpled receipt, a phone left open on a kitchen counter, a friendship that didn't survive the truth. I've had some time to sit with all of it since, and a few things stayed with me that I don't think I'll ever fully put down. I learned that silence isn't the same as peace, it's just the space you leave for someone else to fill, for better or worse. The receipt sat behind my license for 11 days because I was more afraid of being right than of being lied to, and that taught me something ugly about how far a person will go to avoid a truth they already know. I learned, too, that you can love someone and still not have been paying attention to them, that Emily's loneliness didn't excuse what she did, but it also wasn't invisible, not if I'd actually been looking. And somewhere in all of it, I learned that closing a door doesn't require anger. It just requires knowing you deserve better than living in the hallway. Have you ever found a small, ordinary thing, a receipt, a message, a name on a screen, that quietly rearranged everything you thought you understood about your own life? Thank you for staying with me through all of this. If any part of it found you somewhere in your own life, I'd like to hear it. I read every comment. See you in the next story.